Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have my top 20 Dollar Tree Christmas DIYs wrapped all into one video. So grab your favorite beverage, sit back and enjoy. We're going to get started right now. Starting off with one of Dollar Tree's wood truck signs, I'm going to take my utility knife and score it a few times to cut those pumpkins off the back. Now, as I was doing that, it did loosen up those wood slats, which worked out perfect. I just took my Cricut spatula and kind of went underneath that so that I was able to remove it without breaking it. Now, once I scored it on one side, I just flip it over and score it again, and it will pop off nice and evenly. And then I'm going to trim some of that up to get a nice even edge. I'm taking some spackling to fill in the hole at the top where the hanger was, and I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll sand that down. Using some of Waverly's Crimson Chalk Paint, which is a gorgeous red. I'm going to apply 2 coats to this, and I am painting everything except for the bumper at the back and in the front, and then one little piece down at the bottom where you would normally have like a side step. And I'm also not going to paint the wheels or the center caps in this red. But I did make sure I get those outside edges too, just in case you could see them. For the wood slats that go on the back of the truck, I'm using some antique wax made by Waverly, and I'm just going to paint that on with my paintbrush and then take a dry paper towel and go over it and blend that in nice and smooth. For the tires, I'm going to carefully take some of my black chalk paint and paint around everything except for those center caps. And also make sure that you get underneath it to get the coloring on the bottom part of the tire as well. I'll do that for both tires. And then I'm going to take a soft bristled brush, a dry brush, and dab it into my black chalk paint and then wipe most of it off on a dry paper towel so that I can create some shadowing by dry brushing around the fenders, on the outside and the inside of the fenders. And this is creating some shadowing to give it more of a rustic and a 3D dimensional look. I'm also going to add it to the top part of the hood and then around the windows and the doors, basically almost all the way around this piece, just kind of shadowing everything in. Now, as I held my wood slats up, I realized I needed to cut a little bit more off at the top, but I'm going to do that once I get done dry brushing my black on. So where those wood slats would come down at the bottom, I'm going to dry brush a line across there so I'll know where to stop when I get ready to paint that at the top. I also went around the door and then created a line where the door would normally have that opening where the hinges are. Now, I lined my wood slats back up so I would know exactly how much I needed to go back in and trim off. And again, I'm just going to use my utility knife and score it a couple of times, and then it will pop off very easily. Once I have that shaped up, I'm going to take my black chalk paint and I'm going to paint that section right at the top where we just cut off all the way down to my shadowing in one coat of that black paint. For the center part of the wheel, I am using Folk Art's Color Brushed Silver. This is like a metallic type paint that Folk Art makes that you can sometimes find at Walmart, but I will have it listed in my Amazon store in my description box if you are interested in this. So I'm going to paint the front and the back bumper as well as that side step in this brushed silver color. And then I went around the handle and a little bit around those windows just to give it more of a 3D effect. Now, once all of the paint dries, I'm going to reattach those wood slats to the back of the truck just using some hot glue on that bottom rail, line everything up, and then we can set this to the side for just a minute. I'm going to be using one of these 12-inch bamboo wreaths from Dollar Tree. Now, they're not perfectly circular, so mine had more of like a flat shape at the bottom, which worked out perfect, so that's where I decided to place the truck. So I held it in place to figure out exactly where I wanted it to line up on my wreath, and then I flipped that over and I'm taking some floral wire and then feeding that into the spots where I'm going to be attaching it to the wreath. So I just used the wreath as a guide And then I took some hot glue and put a really nice generous amount, and I'm taking some scrap ribbon to put over that hot glue to give it a nice secure hold to hold my floral wire in place, and then cut the excess ribbon off. Then I could take the wreath and line it back up on the truck and make sure I have it in the position that I want it to be in, and I can secure that in place by twisting that floral wire very tightly around the back on each side and cutting the excess off. And then I like to tuck it down into the bamboo wreath so it doesn't scratch my door or anything. Now, once we have that in place, we can flip it over, and I'm going to decorate the top using some of Walmart's lamb's ear. Now, these came 2 little bundles a piece, and so I'm going to use 4 of them, and I'm going to overlap them on the ends. So you'll have 2 on each side, but the ones on the bottom will stick out a little bit longer. So I just held it up there and kind of bend it around to create a shape. And then I'm going to take them one by one and bend them individually to be able to line them up at the top of the wreath. Now, the 2 that go in a little bit closer, I will cut the ends down so that they don't stick up so far. So once I had those somewhat in place, I just took that little tie that came off of the end of it to hold it in place. I thought maybe it would be long enough to tie it around the wreath, but it wasn't. But it did hold it in place until I was able to cut a nice long length of floral wire off and wrap that around really tightly to get it nice and secured around those lamb's ear ends. And then you're just going to want to work with it and make sure you bend it around to the shape of your wreath. Now I'm going to use 2 of these beautiful, very dark red berry picks from Walmart. And I'm going to place 1 on each side and do that the same way by bending those ends and then kind of tucking them underneath the leaves of the lamb's ear. And once I have those in place, I'm going to hold them together using the floral wire that I already had on the lamb's ear. Now, none of this was attached yet to the wreath. So I'm going to take an extra piece of floral wire and wrap that around in the center very tightly to secure that to our bamboo wreath. Again, I'm going to make sure I cut that excess off and tuck it down because you don't want that to scratch your door when you hang it up. I then went in and added 2 more pieces of floral wire off of the center to make sure that everything was nice and snug and secured on there. Now, to create a hanger, I'm going to take just a length of jute rope, tie a knot at the end, and then I'll cut that excess off of the knot. And then I'm just going to feed that underneath the wreath, take the bottom piece and overlap it, and then pull the piece that was that we tucked underneath the wreath to create the hanger. And then I'm going to take a little bit of hot glue to hold that in place so it'll hold it to the back part of the wreath form, so when we hang it up, it will sit nice and flat on your door. Now I'm using some gray burlap ribbon. I believe this came from Dollar General last year, but I'm going to cut down 12-inch lengths. And I started off by cutting 4 of the gray burlap ribbon. And then I am using this beautiful buffalo check ribbon. Now I have this listed in my Amazon store. I bought this. It is actually 50 yards, so you get 50 yards of that for $11, which I think is a great deal. So I cut 6 of those down, and they were a little bit longer than 12 inches, maybe 14 inches. And I'm going to fold that down to create a loop. So I'm not measuring my loops, but I'm folding it down maybe less than half of the way. You're going to pinch it in the middle where you folded your loop down and then hold it in your hand, and you're kind of facing all of your ribbon together to create a cute bow. And then you'll take the larger burlap gray ribbon, and I'm going to do the same thing by folding it down into a loop, pinching it together, and then I'm going to place 1 on each side and holding it all together with one hand where all those loops meet. Now, once I had those 4 gray on there, I decided I needed a little bit more, so I do cut down 2 more lengths, and I did cut these longer than 12 inches so that they would have longer tails. So once I cut those 2 down, I'm going to create the same size loop that I did with the other gray ribbon pinch it together in the middle, and I'll put one on each side to have a very nice long tail. Then I'm going to take a chenille stem, wrap it around where you're holding all of those loops together, where you pinched them and you were holding them. You're going to twist that around really, really tightly. Make sure everything is secured and held in there with that chenille stem. Then you can fluff your bow out and dovetail each end of each of the ribbons. So I kind of cut the buffalo check where some of it was shorter, so the gray was longer behind it, and then some of it, the gray was shorter than the buffalo check. So you could just kind of play around with it and see what looks nice. Then I'm going to take it and attach the top part of the wreath using the chenille stem that was holding all of it together. Again, I'm going to cut that down and tuck it, and then you're going to want to fluff your bow out and position your tails. And now you have a beautiful wreath with less than $10 in it. I found these really beautiful napkins at Family Dollar for $1.50, and they have that really cute red truck on there with the Christmas tree in the back. And you're only going to need one napkin, so you're going to cut it down in half, and it has two of the truck images, one on each end. You'll peel that top layer of the napkin off, and you're going to want to do that for the other one as well. We're also going to be using one of these Dollar Tree mason jar candle holders that holds the votive candle. Cut your napkin down as close to the truck as possible. You will have a little bit of white edging on the outside. You're going to do that for the other truck image as well, so you'll have two of these truck images. And I found that it was going to be easier if I put the lid back on the candle jar, just to make sure that I didn't glue anything up above that rim. Now, to attach the napkin, I'm going to use some Mod Podge. So there's two different ways I'll show you how I do this to attach it. I line the napkin up and then apply the Mod Podge straight to the glass jar, and then press my napkin down and go over it with the Mod Podge around the edging and kind of pushing the air bubbles out as I go and putting a layer of Mod Podge on the top. And then I could go to the other half and apply the Mod Podge to the jar again, and then apply some more on the top of that. Then you're going to want to let that dry before you apply your second image on the opposite side. So here's the second way you can do that, is you can just put the Mod Podge straight on the jar and get a nice good coverage amount of the size of your napkin, and then you can place your napkin directly onto the Mod Podge and then press it down nice and firm, but you don't want to be too firm and rip your napkin. And then you can go back over it with the Mod Podge and push the air bubbles out with the paintbrush as you are applying the Mod Podge to the top. Now, once it dries, you're going to have some sections on each side that you can see through. And I wanted to blend the image in with the mason jar. So I'm going to use some faux snow that I had left over from last year from Dollar Tree. It's really, really pretty, and it has some pretty little sparkles and glitters. So I'm very carefully applying the Mod Podge to the edge of the napkin, just so that we can apply the snow directly up to the edge of the napkin, but not on the napkin. So you're going to want to go around the entire edge of each of the napkins with the Mod Podge, and then apply your faux snow, and then you can shake the excess off. So I'm doing this in sections at a time, so that I don't, the Mod Podge won't dry up before I apply the faux snow. So I'll just go around and do the other side of that napkin and that space in between the two napkins, and then add the snow. And then as you are finished adding the snow, you just want to shake a little bit to get some of that excess off. And you'll continue to do this around the entire mason jar until you have all of those spaces at the bottom and around each one of the napkins filled in with the faux snow. Not only is it blending in the napkin with the jar, it's really giving it a nice high-end, elegant look. Now, once the Mod Podge completely dried, I'm taking a dry paintbrush and gently going over the faux snow to get any of the excess off that didn't attach, so that when you pick it up, it doesn't come off in your hands. Then you can reinsert your top, and I'm going to use one of the battery-operated votive lights, And I think this piece turned out so pretty. These would make great inexpensive gifts. And I just love the way this project turned out. Absolutely adorable sign from Dollar Tree. It is so cute, just the way it is. We're going to use the back side of this, remove the hanger, and then I'm going to take my Waverly White chalk paint and give this 2 nice coats, allowing it to dry in between each coat, and also making sure that I get those outside edges. Now, while that is drying, I'm going to be using one of these wood nativity scenes from Family Dollar for $1. This is so cute. Now, we don't need the piece that it sits in because this is a sign that you can actually set up. I'm going to paint all of those pieces with some black chalk paint. Again, making sure you get those outside edges because you will be able to see those. Now, once that dries, I wanted to lay it out on my sign, and my sign just wasn't big enough to be able to fit the 3 wise men in, because on the original sign, you're able to put it into those slats and have them in different sections. But since these were going to be overlapping each other, I just didn't have the room for them. So I originally was going to place some hot glue and glue baby Jesus right there at the bottom of Mary and Joseph, and then attach the manger part of the scene over top. But then once I glued everything together, it wasn't sitting flush on there. So I do end up taking it apart and then removing all of that glue, and then I can actually put it back together so that everything will sit flush. I just needed everything to sit flat so that when I put it on the sign, I'll be able to glue it down securely, but it will still have that 3D effect when we apply it to the sign. So I found that it was easier to just align each of the pieces up and hot glue them down so they're mostly glued to the base at the bottom. And since I pulled some of that paint up when I pulled these pieces apart, I do have to go in and touch that up with my black chalk paint. And while I was doing that, I decided to go ahead and paint the back side. Since this is a bit of a 3D piece, I wanted to make sure that if you could see the back side of some of this, that it would be painted and it wouldn't be looking like it was unfinished. So once I have all of that done, I'm going to set it to the side and let it dry. And I'm using some of that same 1.5 inch buffalo check ribbon. And I originally started off cutting 4 of the 14.5 inch pieces, but I do end up using 6 of those. And then I'm using some 2.5 inch wired red ribbon from Dollar General, I believe. And I cut 4 of those down to 14.5 inches. So we're going to create a bow just like we did in project number 1 by creating loops and then squeezing them together and then holding them all together in one spot with your hand, and then I'm going to take those red ribbons and apply those to the outside edges. So it'll be 6 of the buffalo check in the middle and 4 of the red on the outside. Now for this one, I am actually going to attach that using a zip tie right where all of those loops meet, and pull that really tightly, cut that excess off, and then you're going to want to fluff your bow out, pull all your loops out, and straighten everything up. And I'm going to make this one pretty much flat, so I'm going to pull those excess pieces out to the side. So I ended up cutting 2 of the buffalo check flush where the zip tie is, so that I would have the same amount of tails in the red and the buffalo check. And I'm going to dovetail each one of those ends. So I wanted the buffalo check to kind of overlap the top of the red ribbon. And then I'll spread those out to the side so you'll have like 4 ribbons spread out to the side. To create a hanger for our sign, I'm using some jute rope, just like we did in project number 1. I'm going to double knot it and then cut the excess off. And then I'm just going to twist it and give it like double strength just by creating the 2 loops together so it'll be double of the rope. Feed it in through the sign and then pull what you pulled through from the front, overlap it to the back, and then pull that nice and tight. I hope that makes sense, you guys. So once you have that in place, you have a really pretty hanger. We can attach our bow right at the top of this ornament sign. So you're still going to have that nice full roundness of the sign. So mostly your bow is glued to the top where the ornament piece would be. Then we're going to hot glue our nativity scene down. Now, on my Cricut, I created this decal, Christ the Savior is Born. If you have a Cricut, I use the font Dom Casual. If you do not have a Cricut, I have this as a free printable on my website, which is in my description box below. So you can go over there, download it, print it on regular paper, and then trace it onto your project. So as I was placing this on there, I found that it was easier for me to cut it down to the circular shape so that I would be able to line it up better when I placed it on my sign. So once I've removed my backing from my decal, I can then use my little Cricut burnishing tool and make sure I have all my lettering down and remove my transfer tape. And you have a beautiful sign. If you're enjoying today's video and you haven't done so already, I would love you to click that subscribe button and the notification bell and visit me on my other social media accounts. All the links are in my description box below. We are using this glass jar from Dollar Tree. Remove the top, we only need the base. Now this has the flat side on the front and the back, and I'm going to give this 2 even coats of Waverly's chalk paint in the color Plaster, which is just like an off-white color. I did paint this entire jar, including that top rim and inside that rim just a little bit and the bottom. Now to seal this chalk paint, I'm going to use some Mod Podge and put a nice even coat on there. This is just going to protect it from chipping off of that glass. Allow that to completely dry. And I'm going to use some of these pop stickers from Dollar Tree, and I'm painting 4 of them in some black chalk paint. So once that paint dries, I'm going to peel it off of the backing and just kind of take my finger and go around it to get any of the rough edges off to make sure they're nice and smooth. I'm using some 1.5 inch buffalo check wired ribbon, and I'm going to determine how long I need it to be to go around the rim of the jar, and I'm going to fold that in half and hot glue it at the seam in the back all the way across, and then I'll hot glue it in the front to give it a nice good seal so that I can use this to wrap around the rim of the jar. So I will just put a little bit of hot glue from the bottom of the rim all the way to the top and hold that in place. And then I'm going to add some hot glue at the top of the rim and the bottom and do this all the way around until the ribbon goes all the way around the rim. Now, a little bit of that ribbon will stick up from the jar, and you want that so it'll have a nice seamless look when we add our snowman's head on there. The head is an actual ornament from Walmart. It was $1.98, and it is absolutely adorable with this buffalo check hat on there. So I removed the hanger and then just kind of ran my finger over that to close any holes up where the hanger is. Made sure that I aligned it, so I want his face to be on one of the flat parts of the jar, and I'm going to put a nice good amount of hot glue on that rim at the top and hold it in place with just a little bit of a tilt so the back of his hat almost touches that buffalo check on the rim. Then I'm using some of Dollar Tree's greenery. It has greenery with glitter and these little white balls. And then one of the mini tiny pine cones off of one of Dollar Tree's picks. I'm going to cut the greenery stems down so that I can make sure that they'll fit properly on the side of the snowman. And I'm going to overlap the ends and kind of bend that around and attach the two together using some jute rope. So I'm going to wrap that all the way around on both sides and then tie it off in a knot and cut my excess rope off. Then I'm going to take that same buffalo check ribbon and create a simple bow just by folding it over on one side and then folding the other side over, pinching the middle together. And then I can take a piece of jute rope to tie around the center of the bow to hold it in place. And I'll double knot that and cut that excess rope off. Now I did end up making my loops a little too big, so I pulled them back through to make those a little bit smaller so it wouldn't be too overwhelming when I add it to the snowman. I also dovetailed the ends of the tails on the bow, and then I'm going to hot glue that bow right to that jute rope that we just attached the two greenery pieces together with. Then I'm going to attach it right on the side of the snowman, but I'm going to add the glue to the actual buffalo check ribbon on the rim so it'll get a nice good hold. And I made sure I pulled his earmuff up so it wouldn't be in the way, and then you can adjust everything once your glue sets. I added a very generous amount of glue right in the center so we can add that tiny pine cone. Well, it's not really super tiny, but it's one of these smaller pine cones. And then we could add our painted pop dots on there. Now, originally I was just going to line them up and then add some hot glue underneath, but they held pretty well. And I am going over it with Mod Podge to seal that chalk paint in so it doesn't chip off. Small wood snowflakes from Hobby Lobby. I did purchase these on sale. I believe they were $4 or $5, and you get like 50 something or another in a pack. So I am placing some painter's tape with the sticky side up just to make it easier for me to be able to paint these small snowflakes. And I started off with 7, but I do end up adding an extra one later on. I'm going to paint these with Waverly White chalk paint. Of course, you can add as many snowflakes to your project as you want to. I did paint the outside edging, and I do recommend that you paint both sides. I did not originally paint both sides, but I do go back and paint the opposite side of the snowflakes as well. I'm using one of Dollar Tree's picture frames, and I removed that felt sticker from the backing, and then I'm going to give this 2 coats of my white chalk paint on the entire outside of this frame. For the backing of the frame, I'm going to cover that using some poster board. So I'm just going to trace that out and cut it down. And then I'm going to attach my poster board, and this is going to give us a nice smooth base on the backing. And I'm attaching that using just a regular glue stick, really making sure I get those outside edges and really good coverage on there. I'm going to place that poster board with the shiny side onto the backing so the matte side is facing me, and seal everything down. And then I'm going to give this 2 coats of that same beautiful crimson chalk paint made by Waverly, and I'm making sure that I go in one direction so all my brush strokes are going in the same direction, and it's going to give you that same beautiful deep red color after that second coat. I'm using some cotton twine from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to cut that down and then separate the strings so it's about 5 or 6 strings intertwined into that one little cotton string. And then I'm going to attach my snowflakes to the end of the string. So I'm just lining it up to see where I want to place them. And I'm putting a dot of hot glue on the back of that snowflake and then adding that little piece of string on there. And then I'm going to line those up after I get each one of those glued onto a string. Then I could play with the placement and decide exactly where I want to put them. Now, originally, I was going to hot glue them to the back, but I felt like that just wasn't going to hold it in place because they kind of dangle around a little bit. So I do end up adding a piece of painter's tape to the back just to hold everything nice and tight. And then you can place as many snowflakes and lay out the design however you want. And then I'm going to make sure I attach each one of those on the back with some painter's tape and then cut that excess string off. And then I can add the backing back into the picture frame and it's simply gorgeous. Now, I did end up adding one more snowflake to that center one because I felt like it just needed a little something else. But like I said, you can put as many snowflakes on here as you want to. And this is where I said you do need to paint both sides. So I did end up having to go back in and paint the back side of each of those snowflakes. And like I said, I added that extra snowflake, and I think this turned out so beautiful. These wood snowflake ornaments from Dollar Tree. We will be using 7 of them. 4 of them I'm going to fill in with some spackling the hole at the top of the ornament, and I found that it's just easier to fill them in from both sides at the same time. That way it doesn't squeeze out the other side. We're going to set those to the side, let that spackling dry up, and the other 3 we're going to cut those outside edges of each of the snowflakes off. Now I'm using my handheld miter shears. If you are interested in these, I have them listed in my Amazon store in my description box. We're just going to cut those angles off of each of the outside of these 3 snowflakes, and it's just going to create a smaller snowflake. Now, once I have all 3 of those cut down, I will take some sandpaper and go over any of the edging if it's rough, and I'm also going to go over those holes that we filled in with the spackling on the 4 larger ones. I'm going to paint all 7 of these with my Waverly White chalk paint, and I did make sure that I painted the front, the back, and all of those grooves in between, so you want to have nice full coverage on that. We are also going to use 11 of the wood cubes from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to glue 4 of them together to make one block. Now, I did set them up to make sure they were the same height, especially for the 4 that we're gluing together, because not all of these little blocks are exactly the same. So I'm hot gluing those together, and then I'm going to give each of these a nice dusting of the white chalk paint. I didn't want full coverage on this because I did want some of that natural wood to peek through. I will also be using a styrofoam star that came in a package from Dollar Tree, and this was back at 4th of July. So I will use a white one, but I'm going to give it some of that white chalk paint so that all of the white matches. And I'm also using a barbecue skewer. I'm going to insert that into the star and then paint a little bit at the top of the barbecue skewer just so that everything has that nice dusting of white. Now, once everything has dried, I'm going to drill a hole in just one of the cubes, and I'm not drilling it all the way through, just deep enough so that I'll be able to put that barbecue skewer in there without it toppling over. So I'm going to glue one of the larger snowflakes directly in the center of the 4 cubes and let that set, and then I will glue one of the single cubes right in the center of that snowflake. And then I'll take another large snowflake to glue in the center of that cube, but I want those outside edges to go in between the ones on the bottom. So they're not going to be directly above each other, but they're going to go tilted so it makes it nice and full, and they're actually in between the ones on the bottom, if that makes sense. Then I'll add another single cube right in the center of that and continue to do that until I have the large snowflakes in place, each alternating in directions. Then I'll add these smaller snowflakes at the top of this to create our snowflake tree. And once I have all of those glued down, I'll glue that last cube with the hole at the top and then determine how long I want my star to extend from the top of the tree, and then I can cut that down and place that in the hole that we pre-drilled with some hot glue. And then I took my hair dryer to go over all of this to get any of those loose glue strands off. This pack of 3 boxes from Dollar Tree that has this gorgeous snowman image on the front. The box itself is 9 3/8 by 14 1/8. And when you unfold it, you just carefully pull those tabs apart so that you don't rip the sides, because you will need the 2 sides of the snowman for this project. It has a gorgeous burgundy red border around it, and we're going to be using an 11 by 14 picture frame from Dollar Tree. So just remove the backing from that, and we will use that as a guide to trace on our box. So I'm going to use the top part of the box as the guide, and I'll cut a little bit off of the bottom since our frame itself is not as long as the picture. I'm just going to trace around that with my pencil and then cut the box down with my scissors, and then I can make sure that everything's going to line up on the backboard of our picture frame. Now, this picture frame is sort of like a brown color, and it would be really beautiful just like this, very simple and very easy, but I decided to go ahead and paint my picture frame in a black chalk paint, and I gave that one coat all the way around the entire frame, including the back. Once that dries, I can put my glass back in and put all of the goodies back inside, and now you have a really beautiful Christmas picture for less than $1.50 because you get 3 boxes for $1, so you still have 2 boxes to wrap gifts with. Tree signs, it measures 6 inches by 10 inches. And I'm going to use Waverly chalk paint in the color Moss. So I'm going to give this 2 even coats all the way around this entire sign. It is a gorgeous green. Now you don't necessarily have to paint the back, but I like for things to look finished, so I did paint the back of this. I'm also using one of these large styrofoam stars that came in a package from Dollar Tree at 4th of July. And a piece of a barbecue skewer. So I'm just going to insert that into the star, and I will give this 2 coats of a Waverly's chalk paint in the color Plaster, which is just like an off-white color. And I did decide to go ahead and hot glue that barbecue skewer in there. Paint down a little ways down on that skewer because we're still going to cut a little bit more off, but you do want that top piece at the star to be painted. Using a plain piece of cardboard and some cream-colored yarn from Dollar Tree, I'm going to wrap this around the cardboard so it measures from that top to bottom piece about 4.5 inches, and I wrapped it about 25 times so that we can make a tassel. You'll just slide it off of your cardboard, and then you're going to want to tie a double knot at the top part of those loops, almost at the tippy top. And then once you get that double knotted, you can leave those 2 strands down and then cut the loops out of the bottom. So again, we're just making a cute, simple tassel out of yarn from Dollar Tree. You're going to want to make 5 of those. So 5 of them that were wrapped around the cardboard 25 times. Then I'm going to make another one that's going to be thicker, and I actually wrapped it around the cardboard about 40 times. I'm using one of these wood stems from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to hot glue that down in the center at the bottom of the sign. And then if your tassels need to be trimmed up a little bit, you can even those up. And I'm going to place 3 of them right above that wood stem. So I'm just going to line those up, and then I could go in and add my hot glue right behind the top part where you tied the tassel together. And I'll hot glue each one of those down. Then you could take the other 2 and you're going to overlap them from these 3 kind of in the middle. So those pieces of yarn overlap down onto the 3 at the bottom, and you'll hot glue those in place. Then you're going to take that last one that's a bit thicker, and we're going to take our styrofoam star and insert that into the top part of the tassel, then line that up right above the 2 tassels there on the sign, and then hot glue it down the same way, except I will add a little bit more hot glue to the back of the star so everything stays secure to the sign. And I just love how this sign turned out. Now you can trim some of that yarn up a little bit shorter if you like. This is so pretty. Bottle brush Christmas trees, as well as one of these lanterns. This came from Hobby Lobby. They were $4.99 originally, but they were on sale, and you get 4 of those. A dowel, as well as the square piece out of the puzzle piece from the Dollar Tree game. So I am holding this up to see about how high I want my lantern to be. And then I'll use my handheld miter shears to cut that down. So I'm just going to score all the way around it, since this is a pretty thick dowel, until I'm able to cut that through and then sand that end down nice and flat so it will sit flush onto that puzzle piece square using some hot glue. Now once I have that in place, I'm going to take some black chalkboard craft paint. I usually get this from Dollar General, and I'm going to paint this entire base for the lamppost, including the bottom. Now once mine dried, I held my lamp up to it and I decided it was a little too tall, so I do cut some of that down, and that dowel itself ends up being about 1 3/4 of an inch from the base to the tip of that dowel. Then I can hot glue that lamp right to the center at the top of the dowel and let that glue set up. Now you have a really pretty lamp post lantern to put inside of our glass jar from Dollar Tree. I am using this glass jar with the removable lid, and I'm going to place my lamp post in the very front center of the jar. Make sure it lines up and that the lid will be able to close, and then I'm going to hot glue that down. I'll do the same thing for those bottle brush trees. I'm going to place one on each side behind the lamp post, using some hot glue to secure that down. Now the taller bottle brush tree, you will have to bend the top part of the tree over a bit so that you'll be able to put that lid back on top of the jar. And then I can glue the second one right beside the big tree, right behind the lamp post. Then I'm going to take some of Dollar Tree's faux snow, and it has the beautiful sparkles in it. And I'm going to fill it up to about the bottom rim of the jar. So you don't want too much of the snow, but just a dusting at the very bottom. And I'm just going to put a little bit in there, shake it around, and it's okay if it gets on the trees and the lamppost. It just looks really pretty. Now I can start decorating the lid for the jar. I will be using some red and black buffalo plaid ribbon. This came from Hobby Lobby. And I'm going to glue this around the jar lid, but I'm making sure that I line everything to the bottom of the jar lid where it attaches to your jar. So you will have a little bit of ribbon sticking up above the jar lid, and that's okay because we're going to glue that down. This particular ribbon is 1.5 inches wide, and it is wired ribbon. I am just hot gluing it to the top and bottom of the outside rim of the jar and wrapping it around and smoothing it down as I go until I get all the way around to the other side and I can glue that end piece down. Then I will make sure that it fits back onto my jar properly, and then I can go in and add a little bit of glue and fold those top edges over to give it a nice smooth finish. So I just added the glue right to the edge of the ribbon and then fold that over. Just be very careful not to burn yourself. Just flip that over and go all the way around until it has that nice clean finish to it. So I thought this would be a really cute Christmas, almost like snow globe, but candle holder. So to decorate my LED candle, I'm using some of this greenery with the red berries off of a Dollar Tree pick. And again, I'm using an LED battery-operated candle. I would not recommend putting a burning candle on top of this. I'm going to trim that greenery down so that it can fit on the outside of my candle. And I'm going to dust that with some of my white chalk paint to give it a nice snowy effect. And then after my paint dries, I'm going to cover the end of this pickup using some jute cord. And I'm just going to hot glue that and wrap it around the entire end. And once I get to the very end, I'll take a piece and glue it right in between the last piece that's wrapped up. And then kind of fold that over. But you don't want to cut your jute cord yet because you want to be able to wrap that around your candle. So I just tuck that in to cover the end of the stem up. And then kind of squeeze it together. And then I'm going to hold it up to my candle to see where I want to place it. and then I can wrap it around this candle about 3 or 4 times. So originally I wrapped mine more towards the top, so I'm not wrapping it super tight, but I will be able to move it a little bit later on. I'm going to cut that excess off and glue the jute cord to itself, because that way I can just slide this off if I want to reuse my candle in a different home decor piece later on. So this looks really, really cute together, but I felt like it needed a little something else. So I'm going to make a messy bow using that jute cord, and I just wrapped it around 3 of my fingers, I'm not sure, maybe 6 or 7 times. Then I will tie the center together using an extra piece of jute cord, double knot that in the back, cut the excess off of the knot off, and then I can glue this cute messy bow right to the top of my greenery. And I think that gave it just a nice little finished look. And even though this is so cute sitting on top of our jar, I still was not completely satisfied. So I decided to add some silver wire LED lights from Dollar Tree. And I pushed those down behind the bottle brush trees, wrapped it around the tree a little bit, and then I'll push that all the way down. Look how cute. I think it just really finished it off with those cute lights in there. Now the battery pack itself is too large to fit underneath the lid, but because that wire is so tiny, I just kind of bent it over the top and I was able to put my lid back on. You don't want to squeeze it. You don't want to over tighten it and break your wire. So I just put it on there right when it was able to close. Then you can hide your battery pack behind your jar where the trees are and you won't be able to see it. Four different wood ornaments from Dollar Tree. I'm going to use 2 snowmen, the Mary with the deer at the end, the farmhouse truck, and the Christmas tree. I'm going to go over each one of these front, back, and sides with the Waverly Antique Wax, and then take a dry paper towel to blend that in and wipe the excess off. Allow those to dry, and we're also going to be using some scrap fabric that I had on hand. This came from Walmart, but you can use the color fabric of your choice. I'm going to cut this down to 12 inches on my Dollar Tree mat with my Dollar Tree rotary cutting tool. Fold that in half, so now you have 6 inches, and I'm going to place that on the mat and cut that down into 1-inch strips. So they're still going to be 12 inches long, and I'm going to cut 12 of these 1-inch strips. I am also going to be using some beautiful gingham ribbon. Now, my mother gave me this for my birthday last month, so I'm not sure where she got it from, but it is the sewing type ribbon. We're going to be adding these to some jute cord, so I'm going to take the fabric, fold it in half, take the loop where it's in half, tuck that under the jute cord, and then take the tails, fold it over the jute cord, pull it through that loop, and then pull it nice and tight. It'll look like a tie. And they're still movable. You'll still be able to move them from side to side on the jute cord if you need more room. So to show you again what I did, you have your loop, then you take your tails over your jute cord, pull it through the loop, pull them tight, even your tails up, and you have a nice bow tie. For the ornament that I'm going to add, I'm going to take some jute cord and do the exact same thing, adding that onto the other jute cord, and then I'll feed it through the ornament, double knot it in the back, and I'll put a dot of glue to hold that in place, cut my excess off, and then continue to add more ribbon. So I'm going to alternate mine in patterns with the gingham and the white, and each one of the ornaments will be in between 2 of the white fabric pieces. For the larger ornaments, for the Mary and then the farmhouse truck, instead of tying it around those ornaments, I'm going to glue them to the back so that they will hang straight when I hang my banner up and they won't flip around to the back side. Again, I'll alternate the patterns with my ribbon, And when I am finished, we'll have one snowman on the very end facing towards the inside of the banner. Then I'll have the Mary, the Christmas tree in the center, then the farmhouse truck because it's more of a similar size to the Mary, and then another snowman facing in the opposite direction as the first one. On the ends, I'm going to create a loop by double knotting that and putting a dot of glue there so that we'll be able to use this to hang our banner up. And I will do the exact same thing on the other end. Now you can hang this up on your wall, on your mantle. I'm going to be using these clear removable hooks from Dollar Tree, and I can hang mine up on my mantle. Tree's bamboo cutting boards. We're also going to use this gorgeous church ornament from Dollar Tree, as well as two of Dollar Tree's larger white bottle brush trees and two of Dollar Tree's smaller bottle brush trees. Now, this is so simple, but I love the way this one turned out. I'm just going to play around with my placement to see how I want everything to be on the cutting board. And once I figure out where I want them to be, I'm going to hot glue each piece down. Now, I loved the way that the white and the wood look together, but you could also add some artificial snow on this and it would be really pretty. This was so simple and so easy, but I really do like how this one turned out. I just love that natural wood and the white color. You guys, if you are enjoying today's video, I would love for you to click that subscribe button and the notification bell below so YouTube will remind you the next time I upload a brand new video. And also visit me on all my other social media links. They're all in the description box below. We're starting off with this Dollar Tree sign. Remove the hanger from the back and the sticker, and then I'm going to take some sandpaper to sand that glitter off of the top. Once I get all of that sanded down, I'm going to take my Waverly White chalk paint and I'm going to give the top and the sides 2 coats and allow that to dry thoroughly. I'm going to take 5 of the tumbling tower pieces and hot glue them together to make one big block, and make sure you wipe your excess glue off because we're going to be painting it and you want it to be pretty flat. I'm going to paint the outside edges only because I'm going to be covering up the top part. And that will only take 1 coat. Now once that's dry, I'm going to use this really pretty barn ornament that I found at Walmart. This was $1.98. And I think it is so adorable. I'm going to remove the hanger, and then I am going to take the white chalk paint and dry brush over these trees. I want to give them even more of a snowy effect than they already had. I am also going to paint the outside edge of the bottom so that I can blend this in with the scenery that we're making. Now, once that paint dries, I'm going to attach it to the top part of those tumbling tower pieces that we just put together. Glue that down, and this is going to set it up a little bit higher off of our platform. I'm going to take some Mod Podge and put a nice thick layer on there and take some Dollar Tree sparkly faux snow and put that all over the Mod Podge to help blend that in and almost make it look like it's sitting on a hilltop. 2 bottle brush trees from Dollar Tree, and I found this adorable cow and cat figurine from Walmart. Now it was a little pricey, it was $3.96, but the detail in it is so beautiful, and it's cows and a little cat, so I loved it. Now I'm going to hot glue these on top of the sign once I find my placement, know exactly where I want them to be. And then I'm going to take the smaller tree and put that beside the barn, and the larger tree right in between the smaller tree and the barn in the back to give it a little bit of height. And it's super cute just the way it is, but I want to put some faux snow on there and kind of blend everything in together so it's a nice snowy scene. So I'm going to put a really generous amount of Mod Podge on there and sprinkle all of that glittery faux snow. and you'll let your Mod Podge dry, and then you can go in later and just kind of tap it to get any of the excess snow off. Again, super pretty, just the way it is, but I'm going to give it a little something extra. I'm going to take some of Dollar Tree's LED lights, the battery-operated LED lights, and I'm going to wrap that around those trees in the back, and then I'll make sure that my cord comes down to the back part of our sign so we can actually tuck the battery pack underneath the sign, and it won't even be visible. My Dollar Tree, I found some of these boxes shaped like houses, and they're super cute. I got the larger size, and it has a beautiful red color on the inside. Mine measures 5¼ inches by 5¼ inches. And I'm going to take some sandpaper and sand off the glitter. Now, luckily, only the glitter was on the lid of mine. And then I'll take my handy little mini vacuum to clean all that glitter up. I have that listed in my Amazon store. If you're interested, that's in my description box below. And of course, my little corner was coming apart, so I glued that back together. Using some giant craft sticks, I'm going to cut the rounded end off, and I'm using my handheld miter shears just to score a nice straight line. But then I'll use my scissors to cut that down. And I'm going to cut these into 3 7/8 inches long. And you're going to need 10 of these. And I'm going to sand each end off and then paint the front or the top and the sides in a black chalk paint, as well as only the top part of the lid in the black chalk paint. Now, once these are dry, we're going to flip them over, and I'll take my white chalk paint and paint the ends that will be visible once we attach these to the roof of the house. So on 4 of them, you'll need to do a strip for the overhang, and on all of them, you'll need the end pieces to be painted white. Then I'm going to paint the box itself in 2 coats of the white chalk paint, including the bottom, but leave the inside that pretty red color. Now the lid for the outside edge, I am going to paint that in 2 coats of the white chalk paint. Now you could leave the top roof just painted black. You wouldn't even have to add the craft sticks if you don't want to, but I wanted to add a little bit of dimension to mine. So now that everything is dry, this is how it looks. And it still has that beautiful red color in there. And this is how the lid looks. Now we're going to take our craft sticks and attach them to the top part of our roof, and make sure you line it up so that your white side that you painted is where the overhang is. And I'm going to leave, I didn't even measure it, I just left a little bit of an overhang in the front and matched it up with the seam at the top of the roof. And I'm going to alternate this from right to left as I go back, so they'll all be straight and meet right in the peak of the roof. And I'm going to secure all of that down with some hot glue. So when you get to the end, you'll have an overhang on the back as well. So once I get all of those in place, this is how it's going to look. So you'll have an overhang on all 4 sides. And then for the front of the box itself, now you want to make sure you have your lid, your opening at the top. I'm using the bottom of this birdhouse as just a guide because I liked the size of the bottom of it, so that I can place this and measure it out on the front of the box and trace it. That rectangle measured 2 7/8 by 2½ inches. Once I have that all drawn out and traced, I'm going to take my utility knife, and first I'm going to score over the lines so that when I get ready to cut this out, I don't split the cardboard or break it. So I just like to go over it, score the straight lines, and then I can go in and cut that out. I just took my time and made sure that I was really careful not to break the box as I was cutting that opening out. Once I have that out, I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper and sand down all those inside edges nice and smooth. Now I'm going to take 6 regular popsicle sticks. I'm going to cut 2 of those down to 3.5 inches, and I'm using my handheld miter shears to do that. And I have that listed in my Amazon store in my description box below if you are interested in those. So 2 of them will be 3.5 inches, and 2 of them will be 2 1/4 inches. And I'm going to paint each one of them in the black chalk paint. Now this is going to become the frame of our opening for our door. I took a black Sharpie to go around the inside edge just to cover that up. And then our 2 longer pieces will be the top and bottom of the opening, and our 2 shorter pieces will be the sides. I'm going to glue it down, but it has a little, it's not completely covering the opening at the bottom. It's about halfway. So your glue, when you're placing it down there, is actually going to go on the bottom half of your popsicle stick, if that makes sense. And then I'm going to attach the sides so everything will be nice and straight when we get ready to add that top piece. And see how it was kind of crooked at the top? This piece will cover it up so it doesn't not have to be exactly perfect. So once I get those glued down, I'm going to take those other 2 popsicle sticks that we had, and they're going to become the cross pieces in the back side for our barn door. I'm going to paint both of those in the black chalk paint, front and back, and I don't need to cut these down. They're already the perfect size for this. Now I'm going to attach them on the inside of our opening at the corners opposite of each other. So I'm going to put some glue on those corners and then set one of the craft sticks in there at a diagonal like this. I'm going to see if I can get it a little closer so you can see. And then I'll put the other one in the opposite direction on the opposite corners, and also put a dot of glue on our middle of our first craft stick so it'll stick together right there in the center. And then I took my hairdryer to go over that to make sure I got all my glue strands out before we go to the next step. We're going to use one of these report covers from Dollar Tree and take one section of that and cut it out larger than our opening so that we can attach this from the inside, and it's going to look like almost like a luminary. And I always like to make sure that it's going to fit before I attach anything. So it's going to give it that luminary look. I'll show you a little bit closer here. Now that I know it's going to fit, I'm going to attach it using some hot glue. I'm going to glue around the outside of the opening on the inside of the box and very carefully place that in and press it down. Just be very careful not to burn yourself. And this is what it's going to look like on the inside. Now I went to my Cricut and created a decal, and as always, when I can, I create a free printable. For those of you that do not have a Cricut, I have this free printable on my website, which is in my description box below if you want to go over there, download it, and print it out and trace it onto your project. So it's very simple. I just created Merry Christmas. We're going to add this to the lid of our box. And then I always like to press it down, make sure all that vinyl is pressed down nice and smooth. I'm going to take Waverly's chalk paint in the color Moss and use 2 of the wood tree ornaments from Dollar Tree, 2 pieces of just green garland that I cut off, and then I dry brush some white chalk paint over it to give it a snowy effect. Then I'm going to trim that down. Now you want to make sure you put your lid on there so you don't put your garland where the lid won't close. So that's why the lid's showing on there before I attach the garland using hot glue. And then I glued some Dollar Tree red berries in the center. Now I can remove the lid so it'll lay flat, and I can hot glue those trees, one on each side of the box right in the center. And I thought it just added a little something extra to it. Now for the inside, I'm going to use 2 of Dollar Tree's battery operated votive candles, and I'm going to set one directly on the bottom of the box closest to the opening where the door is, and then the second one I'm going to set on one of Dollar Tree's wood stems to give it a little height behind the first one. And I think this turned out so cute. I do love this one as well. Collage frame from Dollar Tree that holds the 4x6 pictures. I'm going to remove the backing and then the paper insert. Now the paper insert was much too thin, so I'm going to take that piece and trace it out on a piece of poster board so it can be a little bit more sturdy. Now that we have the poster board cut out, I'm going to use these absolutely adorable gnomes. So this Dollar Tree decal had so much detail and it's so cute. I just love these little images. I held the collage up to the poster board so I would know where to place each one of my gnomes. And although they're going to be a little bit larger than the collage, I tried to center that up and then push everything nice and flat. And once I have them all in place, I can put the collage mat back on top, put everything back into my picture frame, including the backing, close all the little tabs down, and this project was so easy, but I absolutely love, again, how this one turned out. These are so adorable, and it really looks like a nice high-end piece. Styrofoam cones that measure 6.9 by 2.9. Now you can find this candy cane ribbon at Dollar Tree, but I found this one at Dollar General and I liked the colors and the amount of lines better on this one, so I'm going to use the Dollar General ribbon. Cut down 2 rolls. It'll take a little over 2 rolls of this ribbon, cut them down to 4-inch strips, and then place a bead of hot glue at the top and loop it over and glue the 2 ends together. So you'll have a really nice loop that's going to look like this. Then we're going to attach it to our styrofoam cone. And I measured up about 1.5 inches from the bottom of the cone because you want to have some overlapping the bottom of it. And then I'm going to glue it right there where the 2 ends meet so the loop is at the bottom. And we're going to do that all the way around the entire base of the cone. Then the next layer that's going to go above this one, I'm going to place in between the 2 ribbons at the bottom so they overlap in the center. And that one I moved up about 1 inch, so you just want to have enough ribbon at the bottom to kind of cover up the 2 pieces at the bottom, if that makes sense, you guys. Go all the way around the cone and repeat this process until you get to the very top. And for the very top piece, I wanted to cover that styrofoam up, so I'm going to cut 2 little strips of the same ribbon down and overlap them where the lines meet. Then I will hot glue each one of those in place, let that glue set, and then I can take my scissors and go around and trim the outside edging of the ribbon to make a nice circle at the top. And if you didn't want to put the ribbon, you could always paint the top of the styrofoam to the color of your choice. And of course, you could always use the ribbon color of your choice. I just thought it would be really pretty to use this candy cane ribbon. I'm using one of these styrofoam stars from the 4th of July from Dollar Tree that comes in this bag. And of course, it has glitter all over it, so I'm going to give it a coat of my Waverly White chalk paint. And I have it on a barbecue skewer. To be able to place this at the top of the tree, I'm going to take an X-OXO knife and just cut the ribbon around where I want to place my star to make a tiny hole so I'll be able to insert this down into the styrofoam. Then I'm going to take my handheld miter shears and cut the barbecue skewer down to size and then hot glue my star right to the top. You could leave it just like this, but I wanted to have a base, so I'm going to use one of these wood stems from Dollar Tree. I actually got this last year. I haven't been able to see them, or I haven't found them yet this year, so this is some I had left over from last year. And I hot glued it to the bottom, and I think this ribbon tree turned out so beautiful. I absolutely love this project, and I hope you guys like it too. So for the second tree, we're going to use some of the microfiber cloth from Dollar Tree. Make sure your furry part's on the outside and place the cone. So this is a scrap piece. It's not a full piece of microfiber cloth because I have used some of this in a previous project. I'm going to wrap it around the cone at the bottom and make sure I have enough to be able to go all the way around the cone and hot glue that seam in place. Let your glue set up and then you can roll it around to see how much more fiber cloth you'll need, and then I'll cut that down so that I'll be able to glue that around the cone as well. So I found that it was easier once I had it cut down to make sure you pull it really tight and then run your glue on the outside seam just from the bottom to the top of the cone, and then roll it and let the glue set up. For the bottom, I wanted to make sure I had enough fabric to go all the way across, and I just took my hot glue and glued on the styrofoam itself on the outside edge to get a nice good seal, and then I can pull the fabric very tightly, let that glue set up, and then we'll do the exact same thing on the top. You can leave that excess hanging over because once the glue sets, we'll go in and cut that off. And this cloth is very forgiving because it has all that furry stuff on the outside, so it blends together really well. Now, I had too much fabric at the top, so I will cut that down just to leave enough to be able to wrap the top of this. And I found it easier to do one side at a time, so I'll fold that over and hold it in place and then do the opposite side. And then that'll leave the two corners on the outside, and you can pull it nice and tight and then glue those two outside corners down. Just be careful not to burn yourself with the hot glue. So once I have that top done, I can take my scissors and go around the bottom and cut that extra fabric off to make everything nice and flush so that it'll be able to sit flat on your table. Again, I'm going to take another wood stem and glue this to the bottom. So what I did end up having to do is I did take my X-Acto knife, and I forgot to film this part, but once you glue it on there, just took my X-Acto knife on one side, one edge of the wood stem so that I was able to pull the fabric up and put more glue under there to make sure the stem adhered really well to the bottom. I'm going to take another one of the Dollar Tree styrofoam stars and a barbecue skewer. And it's really pretty the way it is, but it was very shimmery and glittery, the star was. And you could leave it just like this if you like the shiny glitter, but I wanted to tone mine down a little bit, so I painted the star with some crimson chalk paint, and then I did the same thing I did with the other one, took the X-Acto knife and cut a little hole at the top to be able to put the star in. And these two trees look so pretty together. Using a straight edge and 12 of the tumbling tower pieces from Dollar Tree, I'm going to take some Gorilla Wood Glue and glue 3 of these end to end and make 4 sets of 3. I'm also using one of these boxes with the lid from Dollar Tree, as well as the bottom of another box. So it's the exact same size, you just only need 2 bottoms and 1 lid. We're going to stack the boxes directly on top of each other and attach them together using some wood glue, and then I'll add a little bit of hot glue to the corners to hold it in place temporarily until that wood glue sets up. Now, I did not want the seam around the outside, so I'm going to take some spackling and go around that and fill all of those cracks in. And I find that it is easier to go ahead and put the spackling in and then come in with a damp paper towel and wipe the excess off and kind of push the rest of that spackling down into the crack. I will also cover all of the cracks on all of the tumbling tower pieces that we put together, all the way around all of the edges, and also go over that with the damp paper towel to get any of the excess off. Now, while that is drying, I'm going to take the lid and one of these wood planks from Dollar Tree. They are 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches, and I'm going to place that on top of the lid to cover up that design. And to attach this, I'm going to use the Gorilla Wood Glue. And because the wood plank is slightly larger, I'm going to take my lid and center it right on top of that wood plank, set it to the side, and let that glue set up. I'm also using one of these wooden cubes with the little insert. You'll need 2 of the bottom pieces, but not the inside of the inserts. I'm going to take a sanding block and go around all of these pieces to get that rough wood off of there and make it nice and smooth, and also go over all of the pieces that I put the spackling on. And then I'll just take a dry paper towel and wipe all of that dust and debris off. I'm going to take Waverly's chalk paint in the color Crimson and go over this entire large box that we put together inside and out with 2 coats. I'm also going to be painting the 2 smaller cubes with the same crimson paint in 2 coats, as well as our tumbling tower pieces. Again, they'll all take 2 coats inside and out. Now for the larger box as well as the tumbling tower pieces, we're going to attach these in each of the corners using some wood glue, and then I put a dot of hot glue on the very bottom to hold it in place until the glue sets up. You want to make sure they're nice and straight. Again, this is in the larger box where we glued the 2 boxes together on the top. Once I have all 4 of those in place, I'm going to set that to the side and let that completely dry. I am using one of these cylinders, like cardboard storage containers from Dollar Tree. I don't need the lid for this. I'm just going to use the bottom base of it, and I'm going to give this 1 coat of that crimson chalk paint so everything will match and be cohesive. Also make sure you paint the bottom of it. Now that bottom part, I will be using this LED strobe light that I found at Dollar Tree for Halloween, and it does have a Halloween design on it, but we're going to cover that up. And when you push the button, it has yellow, green, and red light on there. And I thought this would be perfect for the light for the front of our train. Now, because we'll need to be able to change our batteries out, I'll show you how we're going to attach that in just a minute for a temporary hold rather than a permanent hold. Because I want everything to match, I'm going to go over this whole piece with that crimson chalk paint, including the push button. Now to protect that chalk paint on that push button, because we'll be pushing that to turn the light on and off, I'm going to put some Mod Podge on there. Now to attach our light to the front of the train engine, I'm using some duct tape and then just rolling that around, or you could use some 2-sided sticky tape. That way I can place it on the back of our strobe light, and then we can place that in the bottom of our cylinder, and it is a perfect fit. Now I did make sure that I lined the seam of the cylinder or tube up with the button so that all of that will be on the bottom of our train engine. And that's going to hold it in place, but still we'll be able to change those batteries out. And later on, we're going to attach this to that double stacked box. But before we do that, we're going to create the wheels. We're going to be using 2 of the lids on a storage container from Dollar Tree and 8 of Dollar Tree's magnets. So the magnets are going to go on the 2 smaller wood cubes, and we're going to also use some Dollar Tree dowels. I'm just going to hold that up to figure out the width of each of these boxes, make a mark, and then I'll use my handheld miter shears to cut those down. Now, I have this listed in my Amazon store. If you are interested, those are in my description box below. Once I have those cut down, I'm going to paint the dowels as well as all of the magnets on the front and the back in black chalk paint. Now make sure you have the opening face down, and we're going to glue these to the bottom of those wood cubes. And I'm going to glue the dowel down first, and then I can glue the magnets to each end. When I get ready to glue the magnets, you're going to want to put that at the very bottom of the magnet itself so that the majority of the magnet is more on the box. And I'll show you in just a minute what it's going to look like when you flip it over and set it up. That way it'll look more like wheels, and you want to glue them in the exact same spot so that it will sit level. You'll do the exact same thing for the other box. So now they look like they're glued in the center, but they're actually glued at the bottom part of the magnet because the outside part is a little bit larger. Now for the engine itself, I'm going to use those 2 lids for the wheels on the back part of the engine, not the container itself, just the lids. And originally I was going to use a dowel and glue these down. Now, if you're going to create this project, please don't do this part, because once I glue that dowel down, I'll show you exactly what I mean. It didn't sit correctly. So on the tube itself, I'm going to use 4 of the magnets for the wheels as well as 2 of the dowels. And I found that it was easier to just set my tube on top of the dowels, make a mark on the other side with my pencil, and then cut 2 of those down to the same size. And they actually ended up being 2 7/8 of an inch. I'm going to sand each of those ends down nice and flat and glue the magnets to the very bottom, just like we did on the cubes on the back. And I'm going to glue one on each side. Make sure it's level because the tube is actually going to sit on top of the dowel for these. And then I always like to make sure it's going to fit before I create the next one. And I'll do the exact same thing for those. Once I have those glued in place, this is when I decided I was going to glue the dowels to the center of the inside of these lids. But again, you're not going to want to do this part for that dowel because I'll show you in just a minute, it doesn't work out. Now I'm going to take the lid where we glued that wood plank to it, as well as our 3 wheel bases, and give each one of these a coat of the black chalk paint all the way around, including the inside of your lid, because you will be able to see that. Now, because those tin storage containers are metal, I'm going to go over that, and then I also went ahead and went over the magnets with some Mod Podge to keep that chalk paint from chipping off of there. And I did that on the inside and the outside. And you'll just let that Mod Podge dry. So now when I go on to the back part of the engine, I'm going to glue that dowel down. Again, you're not going to want to do this. I'm just showing you my mistake so you won't make it. And then I'm going to take that cardboard tube, make sure the seam is on the bottom because that's where we're going to attach our wheels. And I'm going to hot glue the wood dowel to the bottom of that. And I'm actually just going to put the wood glue right in the center because that's the only part that touches the cylinder tube. Then once that's set up in place, I'm going to go around each edge with some more hot glue just to give it some more security and make sure it doesn't come off. And I didn't measure, so I don't know exactly how far apart they are. But now I was getting ready to attach that cylinder to the back of our engine here. That's when I realized that I wanted my cylinder to actually be on the wood piece and nothing hanging down. But if I do that, then the wheels on the back part of the cylinder were sitting up and not flat on my table. So I decided to pull everything off of the box itself, go ahead and make my marking on where I want to put the cylinder. Then I'm going to hot glue that onto the wood piece. And once I have that in place, I'm going to go around it with some more hot glue just to make sure that it stays in place. And it's also going to kind of look like a weld, like the way an actual engine would look if it were welded. Then, of course, because I'm a little bit extra, I went ahead and scraped that hot glue off and sanded it down, and now I can go in with the crimson paint and paint over the hot glue I put around the engine part where I attached the cylinder to the back as well as the bottom. And then I just decided that I would use my table as a leveling surface and use those 2 wood cubes from Dollar Tree, glue those to the center of the lids, paint the outside edges black, and then I can line them up and glue them to the center at the bottom of each side of the box. And that way, all of the wheels will now sit flat on your surface. And I didn't show this, but I also painted the top part of our tumbling tower pieces with the crimson chalk paint because I decided I did not want to permanently attach the lid that we made on top of the engine. I want to be able to take that on and off so that I can change the decor out. And I cut 2 more dowels down to 2 3/4 of an inch, and I'm using one of these wooden candlesticks from Hobby Lobby. They come, I believe they're 6 in a pack for $5. I'm going to paint all 3 of those with 1 coat of the black chalk paint. The 2 dowels are going to be what we glue to the bottom of our freight cars for the back so that they can connect to each other. And I'm just going to put a strip of hot glue right in the center and glue those down. Let that glue set up, and then I decided I wanted to go in and dry brush some black chalk paint around all of the edges of the freight train, including the top and the bottom. And I did that for both of those, as well as the engine itself. And I also went over the tumbling tower pieces inside and out. This part is completely optional. If you don't like distressing, you can just skip over this part, but I think it just gives it a little bit more character. And I also went around the front part of the engine. Now I'm going to take that candlestick and actually glue the smallest part to the top of our cylinder. So the biggest part is coming out. It looks like the smokestack. So I'm going to just use some hot glue and place that right in the front center of the engine. And then for the two freight cars, I'm going to glue one of them just a little bit on the dowel to the other one. And then I'll go in and add a little bit more hot glue, let that set up. Now I don't want to attach my two freight cars to my engine so that I can take these apart and store them when it's not Christmas. I want to be able to take that out and not take up so much storage space. So I drilled a hole the size of the dowel in the back, and that way you can just slide it in. You can actually move the freight cars from left to right, and also you could take it apart for storage. I just took a piece of Dollar Tree garland, twisted it around to make a small wreath, trimmed it down a little bit, and then took my white chalk paint and dry brushed all around that to give it a snowy effect, and then tied a very simple bow with some red and white baker's twine. And then I'm going to hot glue that to the front of our train engine, and the center of the lights will be in the center of the wreath. And then you won't see any of that Halloween design that's on the top of the strobe light, but you can still press the button and turn the lights on and off. Now for the back, I'm going to use some of these mini ornaments from Hobby Lobby and cut the hangers off. And I thought this would just be cute to hot glue one on each side of the freight cars. And I decided to use a candy cane and a snowman and a Christmas tree and the word joy. And then for the engine itself, I glued Santa on each side. Then you can decorate it however you want. For the driver, I'm going to use this snowman ornament from Dollar Tree. And then I decided I wanted to make a Santa sack. So I'm going to use some of this fleece scarf from Dollar Tree. I bought this last year, but I'm going to cut down two pieces that measure roughly 6 inches by 8 inches. And I made sure that I had the same pattern for both of those. So once I get those cut down, because my material is the same on either side, it didn't matter which way I lay them. But if you recreate this and you're using a different pattern, make sure you have the pretty sides facing each other and the outer on the outside. So I'm just going to run some glue right across the bottom and then fold that over and create our seam at the bottom. And then on the sides, I'm going to glue all the way up, except I'm going to leave about 1 inch at the top. You don't want to hot glue that top piece together. Then I'll glue the other side the exact same way, leaving 1 inch at the top. And then make sure your glue has set up, and then you can turn it inside out, and your seams will look like they're on the inside and they're actually sewn. So that's why if you're using something that has a different pattern, you want to make sure that the pretty sides are facing in when you're gluing them. Now for the top, I'm going to use two 18-inch pieces of jute rope or jute cord, and we're going to create a drawstring bag. So you want to place that in the center at the top where you're going to be able to fold that down. Run a bead of glue at the very top and try to hold your string as straight as possible, because you don't want to glue the string to the fabric itself. You want it to be able to freely move in between what you just glued. So I found on the other side it was just easier once I placed my string in the center of where I'm going to flip that over, just set something on each side to hold it in place. Then you can run your glue at the top and fold that over and glue it down, and just be really careful not to burn yourself. And also make sure that your strings are able to freely move. On each end, I'm just going to tie a knot, and then cut the excess off. And this is going to create the drawstring for Santa's bag. Now you can fill this up with whatever you like. I'm going to fill it up with some polyfill, and you don't want to overstuff it, but I'm just going to put enough in there to fill it up so it looks like it's full of presents, and then you can close it together. If you want, you can tie the strings together, but I'm going to place this in the very back of the freight car, and then if you need to add a little more, you can add a little more. And then of course, to sit in front of Santa's sack of presents is this really cute Santa ornament that I found at, I think it was Family Dollar, you guys, for $3. It was either Family Dollar or Dollar General. And I'm going to cut the tags off, set him there, and now you have the cutest Christmas train. Off with 2 of these glass jars from Dollar Tree. Remove the lids, we will not need those in this project. Using some of Dollar Tree's faux snow, this is in the shape of those mini snowballs. We're going to fill each one of these glass jars up, and you do want to shake it around a little bit to get it to settle down so that you can fill these almost all the way up to the top. Then I'm going to use some E6000 and place that in 4 different spots on one of the jar tops. And then in the opposite spot, I'm going to put some hot glue. That's going to give it that temporary hold until that E6000 sets up. When you line these up, they do have seams on the side, so you want to make sure you keep your seams on the same side. And for the hat, we're going to use one of these Dollar Tree ornaments, and I'm going to hot glue that to the top of the jar. Now, again, you want to make sure that the front of your hat is in the middle of those 2 seams on the sides of the jar. Then, using one of Dollar Tree's microfiber cloths, I'm going to cut 1 2-inch strip. And I am using the end piece that has the seam on that outside edge. Then I'll take that strip and cut 2 6.5-inch strips out of that. Once I have both of those cut out, I'm going to take some hot glue and add it to the seam that's already there. And then I'm going to fold it over in half, and be really careful not to burn yourself, but you just want to kind of flatten that out where the seam is on the edge. And then on one end, you're going to hot glue that together. You do want to leave the other end open. And then we're going to do the exact same thing with the other piece of cloth. Once this one's together, I'm going to go back to the first one because the hot glue is cooled off now. And then I'm going to turn it inside out. So I'm doing that so that it will look like it's sewn, and that seam, the glue part, will be on the inside. So if you have a little trouble trying to get that back through, I just use like my marker, or you can use a pencil or anything, and just kind of push that out until you can get it completely turned inside out or right side out. And you do the exact same thing for the other one. Now once both of those are turned out, I'm going to fill them up with some polyfill. And I'm going to push that down again using my marker to get that polyfill down at the bottom. You don't want to fill it up too much. You just want to have it nice and fluffy. Now, at the end that is open, you're going to want to leave at least 1 inch at the top with no polyfill. You want to be able to kind of push that flat. And you're going to do that for both of these microfiber cloths. Now I'm going to set those to the side and draw a face for our snowman, and I'm using an oil-based Sharpie marker, and you can find these at Hobby Lobby. And I'm just going to draw a very simple face and then color in those eyes. And then I'm going to use some acrylic paint in the color pumpkin orange to paint in the nose. And then I'm going to take the end of that paintbrush and just dab it into my white chalk paint to create the whites for the eyes. Now I'm going to create a scarf using this buffalo check ribbon, and I purchased this from Amazon, and I have this linked in my Amazon store if you're interested, which is in my description box below. I'm just going to wrap that around where the two glass jars meet and tie it. And then I'm going to fold them in opposite directions. So to begin with, I'm going to put a little bit of hot glue to hold that scarf in place, and then cut my ribbons down to a similar length. And then I'm going to twist them in opposite directions and glue just that top one down. And then I'll take my scissors and cut little slits on the end to make it look like a realistic scarf. Now we can take those legs that we created and make sure that those top parts are very flat. And I'm going to hold them sort of like in a crisscross pattern, set my snowman jar on top, and see if I need to cut any excess off. And if I do, I'll just cut those little corner pieces off. And then once you know that everything's going to fit nice and snug under the jar and it's going to sit flat, I'm going to put a really heavy amount of hot glue there, set the jars down, hold it firmly in place until that glue sets up. For the shoes, I am using these adorable ornament from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to cut the tags off at the top, and I am going to put the glue at the back part of those shoes or little snow boots, and then press the leg right in the back part of those shoes. Then I'm going to fill each one of them up with that polyfill all the way to the top till you have a little bit of that fluff sticking out so it looks like really cute snow boots. We're going to start off with one of Dollar Tree's very large ornaments and remove the hanger at the top. Now I'm going to take some apple barrel white acrylic paint. I'm going to use a styrofoam plate or a paper plate or whatever you have, and I'm going to cut a piece of toilet paper roll down so that I'll be able to drain this. I'm going to put the paint inside of the globe, the ornament, and I'm going to twist that around until I get it nice and covered on the inside. So if you need to add more, you can just add more, but you don't want to add too much because you don't want to waste your paint when all of it drains out. So just take your time and twirl it around until the entire inside is covered. Set it on your toilet paper roll and let that drain out. We're going to use one of Dollar Tree's snow globes and remove the lid and all the insides. And for this one, I'll be sitting it on top of two craft sticks. I'm going to do the exact same thing I did for the ornament, allowing that paint to swirl around on the inside. And it's just going to give this a really beautiful like a glass effect on the outside. Now I set mine to the side and I let them dry completely overnight. And yes, I did put way too much in that one because I had to change the plate out because I had so much extra paint coming out. But they just look so elegant and beautiful. Now we're going to use the lid off of this Dollar Tree jar, and you want to place your designs because I'm going to use some snowflake stickers, which actually came from Hobby Lobby, but you can also find some snowflake stickers at Dollar Tree. But whatever design you put on the bottom of this lid, you want to make sure that it is facing where the lid itself that you twist onto the jar is facing up, because that's where we're going to attach our ornament. So I just alternated the sizes for my snowflakes all the way around, and see, this is where we're going to place our ornament itself down into the top part where the lid twists to the jar, and you want the open part of your ornament at the top. I'm going to secure that down with some E6000 as well as some hot glue and just set that in place. And I did apply just a little bit of pressure to make sure that glue sets. Now if you have a little bit of glue oozed out, make sure you wipe that off before it dries. Now for the face of our snowman, we're going to take that snow globe itself, and I'm just putting it in between two tumbling tower pieces to kind of hold it in place so it doesn't roll around. And I'm using an oil-based Sharpie marker, which you can find at Hobby Lobby, and I'm going to draw a really simple face. Now you guys can get really creative with the face of your snowman. You could give them different colored eyes, whatever you like. For the nose, I'm going to use that same acrylic pumpkin orange paint. Paint that out. Now that does take 2 coats. You'll have to let that dry in between coats. And then once that second coat dries, I'm going to take that fine-tipped Sharpie marker and draw a couple of lines. I'll do the same thing that I did in the previous snowman with the eyes, taking a dot of white paint to add there. For the hat, we'll be using this black and red buffalo plaid, beautiful Christmas ornament from Dollar Tree. And on the bottom part of that, I'm just using like some tweezers, but you could use a screwdriver or whatever. I want to poke a hole in the bottom so we can take this bamboo skewer and add it to the inside so we'll have some stability for our hat. Once I have that hole poked through there, I can add a little bit of hot glue, stick that bamboo skewer in there and cut it down where it's just a little bit hanging from the bottom, because I want to put the hat a little bit off to the side, and this is going to help us secure it to the snowman's head. I'm going to take the hot glue gun and hold it in place until it melts a hole right there where I want my bamboo skewer to go into. But before I attach that, I'm going to take some greenery pieces. These are some pieces from Hobby Lobby pick that I've had, and I thought it would be really cute to add these under the hat to look like hair. So I'm going to cut quite a few of those off, and I'm going to glue them to the bottom of the hat where they'll stick out from the outside of the rim. And I'll do that all the way around the bottom, so it'll be nice and finished looking once you put the hat on, no matter where you're looking at him from the front or the back. Then once all of those are in place, I can add some hot glue to the bottom of the hat and the barbecue skewer, and I'll be able to attach this to the top of our snowman's head. And he is really coming together, looking so adorable. Now I'm going to take some of these pop dots, and you guys have seen me use these before. I'm going to paint those with 2 coats of my black chalk paint and let them dry. And I'm going to attach our snowman's head using some E6000 and some hot glue to the base of the snowman, and just kind of make sure everything's straight and lined up. And then I'm going to go around the outside edge with the hot glue just to make sure it's nice and glued and secure. And you're not going to see any of that anyway because we will be covering it up. Now that our pop dots are dry, I'm going to hot glue 3 of those for the buttons in the front. And then I'm going to take some Hobby Lobby red and black buffalo plaid ribbon to create the scarf, and it's going to match perfectly with the hat. I'm just going to wrap that around, tie it, and then I'll take the 2 end pieces and kind of go in opposite directions and glue that top piece down just like we did in our previous snowman. Trim the ends of the scarf down a bit, and then I will cut tiny little slits in the ends and fray out somewhat to make it look like a realistic scarf. These wood circles from Walmart. They measure 3 1/4 inch, and you get about 4 or 5 in a pack for a few dollars. I'm going to paint the entire piece on both sides as well as the outside edges with some Waverly White chalk paint. And I'm using one of Dollar Tree's candle holders. Now, if the sticker's stuck on there pretty good, I like to use my hairdryer to kind of heat that up to remove it, and then take some rubbing alcohol to get the rest of that glue off. I'm using one of these smaller bottle trees from this 2-pack at Dollar Tree. Now it's a little too tall, so I'm going to cut it down a little bit and then remove the excess from the base, and then I can reattach the tree back to the base using some hot glue. I'm going to sit that on top of the wood circle, and I'm also using this snowman with lantern figurine from Walmart for $1.98. Once I have those placed where I want them, I'm going to take some hot glue and glue each one of those to the wood base. And then I'm going to take some Mod Podge and go around the top part of the wood piece up around the snowman as well as the base of the tree, but be really careful not to get the outside edging because that's where we're going to attach the glass candle holder. I'm going to take some faux snow from Dollar Tree, sprinkle that all over the base where the Mod Podge is, and wipe that outside ring off so that we don't have any snow there. I'll take the excess snow and put it into the glass container, as well as add a little bit more, because when we get ready to put these two together, you will lose just a little bit of it. Now, I didn't have any E6000 on hand, so I decided to use some Gorilla Glue that my husband had, and it worked perfectly. And also, there's no smell like E6000 has, so I'll probably start using this every time. Just place the two together and allow your glue to dry. And then I'm going to take some wax paper and drape it over top of the glass container. And I didn't have any rubber bands, so I'm going to use a hair tie to hold the wax paper in place and just pull the rubber band or hair tie about middle way down, trying to get the wax paper as tight as possible. Also using one of these tin metal containers from Dollar Tree, I only need the lid portion, and I'm going to put a little bit of hot glue to place that and hold it in the center at the top of the wax paper. And then I'm going to start filling it in with hot glue. So I'm going to fill that tin up almost to the rim and then hold it to the side and let some of that drip over so that it creates runs and drips. And then I'll go on the outside of the wax paper up against the base of the tin and start filling that in all the way to the outside edge and put enough so that it drips or runs down the edge of the wax paper. And I'll continue to do that all the way around the top part of this glass container. Now, every once in a while, I do hold it over to the side so that some of it can run down, and also pull the wax paper tight because it'll start loosening up a little bit. So you'll hold that tight and then add a little bit more and let it just run to however long you want your drips on the sides to be. Now, I originally was going to put a votive candle nestled down in that tin, but as I'm tilting it, it's very uneven, so I decided to go ahead and fill that tin in with some hot glue to give it a nice level surface. Now, I let my glue set up for about 2 hours, let it really cool off before I remove the wax paper from the glass container, and it slides off very easily, and then you can remove the wax paper from the inside. Now, the wax paper did stay on the bottom part of this that was actually sitting on top of the glass, and that's okay because we're going to be painting that, but I did make sure that I got all the excess paper out from around all of the curves of the drips, and so that's nice and clean. Using some white chalk paint, I'm going to start off by painting the bottom side because you will be able to see that once you get it on your glass container. And once that dries, I'm going to paint the top side. Now, I did put 2 coats on the top side and made sure that they were nice and smooth so it'll look like a beautiful melted snow. It also resembles candle wax dripping, but it's really beautiful and I love all of the texture that it has in there. Now, to protect that chalk paint, I'm going to use some Mod Podge. I just want to make sure that it doesn't chip off of the hot glue because I've never really tried this trick before. So I just wanted to protect that, make sure that it stays just like it is. And once your Mod Podge dries, you can then just set it on top of your glass container, or you could glue it, but mine had a pretty snug fit, so I didn't have to glue it down. I'm going to set this on a candle holder that I already had from Target, and then place a battery-operated votive right on top, and now you have an absolutely beautiful snow globe candle. 2 of the 5.5-inch square signs from Dollar Tree, as well as one of the smaller signs that holds the succulent. I'm going to remove that succulent and then use a pair of pliers to remove the staple that was holding it in there. And then I'll remove the hangers from the back of both of those signs. Use my hairdryer to again heat up the glue and remove the stickers from all of these 3 signs. Then I'm going to take some spackling and go around the outside edges of one of the signs to give it a nice smooth finish and to fill in those cracks. Then I'm going to clean up my mess with this mini desk vacuum cleaner. I love this thing. It's so handy, and I have that listed in my Amazon store below if you are interested in that. I also removed the leaves from the front of both of those signs, and I tried to remove most of that paper and it just wouldn't come off. So I cut 2 pieces of poster board down so that I can use a glue stick and attach these to have a nice smooth surface on the inside of both of these signs. And you really want to make sure that you press those corners and those sides down to get it adhere very, very well. Again, I did that for both of the signs and then let that glue set up. And then once the spackling was dry on the back of one of the signs, I'm going to take some sandpaper and sand that down and nice and smooth. I am also going to be using 4 of these 3/8 of an inch wooden dowels from Walmart. And I'm going to cut them down to 8.5-inch lengths, so you will need 4 of those. And I'm using my handheld miter shears. Again, this is another lifesaver that I purchased from Amazon, and I have that linked in my Amazon store as well. Each end that I cut, I made sure that I went over it with some sandpaper to get it nice and flat. And then I'm using 2 barbecue skewers from Dollar Tree and cutting those down to 8.5 inches as well. Now I'm going to set all of that to the side and go back to my signs. So I'm going to paint each one of these in Waverly White chalk paint. And I'm going to give this 2 coats. So I am painting the inside and those outside edges as well as all 4 dowels. And on the back side, the side that we put the spackling on, you do not need to paint the entire back of it. You will just need to paint the outside edges, but I did paint the entire back of the other one, and these did take 2 coats of paint. So I just left a square in the middle because that's where we're going to be applying our other sign with the succulent in it. But before we apply that, I'm going to take one of these brain teaser games from Dollar Tree that has the holes on the opposite ends, as well as a Dollar Tree bookmark. And because the hole in this brain teaser game is large enough, I was able to slide each end on each side of this game piece and then pop that bookmark together without gluing it. You could add a little bit of glue, but because I was able to close it, you can still move the bookmark back and forth. I centered that up on the bottom of this sign using some hot glue. And then I'm going to take some black chalkboard craft paint, and I'm going to paint this entire piece except for the bottom because you won't see that. But I also painted the bookmark. This did take 1.5 coats. I just had to go back and touch up a few spots. Now I'm going to attach it to the piece that we put the spackling on right in the center, and I'm going to secure that down with some hot glue. This is going to become the top part of our lantern. So once I have that set up and centered and the glue has set, we're going to take the other sign and flip it over. That's going to be the bottom and this will be the top. And we're going to attach the 2 together with those 4 dowels that we've already painted. I'm going to take my Gorilla Glue and add it in each corner on the inside of the bottom of the lantern. And then I'm going to take some hot glue and run that down the side of the dowel and then hold that in place and keep it as straight as possible. I'm going to push that into the corner, let that hot glue set up, and I'll do that for each of these dowels until I have one in all 4 corners. Then I'm going to take the Gorilla Glue and place that on top of each one of the dowels. And then I will take my hot glue and on the top part of the lantern, I'm going to run that up each of the seams in the corner so that when we get ready to place this on, that hot glue is going to hold that in place until the Gorilla Glue sets up. So I'm just going to place that on there, and as I get my top on there, I'm going to push each of those dowels to the corners where the hot glue is and let that set so they're nice and straight. And this is how your lantern should be looking. Now I'm going to take one of these ornaments. This is a beautiful wood ornament that I found at Dollar General for $1. And I'm going to remove the tag as well as this chenille type stem that they have glued around it. And then I'm going to pick all of that hot glue that they had it holding that chenille stem on. And then I'm going to sand that down nice and smooth. And once I have everything sanded, I'm also going to cut the hanger at the top using my miter shears just to remove that and get it as close to the edging as possible, and then sand that down nice and smooth. I'm also going to be using 2 of Dollar Tree's trees. They're like plastic trees with a ton of glitter on them. I'm going to remove the hangers, and also this is when you're going to be using your barbecue skewers. So these trees have a flat, semi-flat side, and then the other side kind of extends more. We're going to be attaching these barbecue skewers to the flat side. On the lantern on the side where the bookmark is not the circle, it's on the side, I am going to hold the barbecue skewer up in the center of that and use a pencil and mark the bottom because I want the trunk of the tree to set right there at the edge of the lantern. And I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. So now I know where my trunk needs to be. I can attach the ornament to the barbecue skewer. So I'm going to run some hot glue all the way down the back of this tree on the flat side, and then I can attach that to the barbecue skewer, let that glue cool down a little bit, and then I'll flip it over and run some more glue on each side of the barbecue skewer. And I'm going to do the exact same thing for the other tree and the other barbecue skewer. So we're going to have a tree on each side of our lantern. Make sure you remove all your glue strands before you paint, and I'm going to paint each of these in that black chalkboard craft paint, and I'm painting both sides. Make sure you get all those nooks and crannies on all of those branches. And I'm also going to paint that round wood ornament all the way around, front and back, all the nooks and crannies, and the inside rim of the round part of the ornament. Now I can attach my trees to the side. So again, I'm making sure my bookmark at the top is on the side, and I've already found the center at the top and the bottom and made a mark with my pencil so I would know exactly where to place my glue so that I can glue these down. So you are gluing with the barbecue skewer on the inside of the lantern and just the tree on the outside. Once that glue sets, I'm going to run some glue on each side of the barbecue skewer at the top and the bottom and let it set up. Then I'm going to flip it over, and I've already made my mark for my centers for the other side so that I can glue the other tree down, again with the barbecue skewer facing the inside of the lantern. Now, one of my barbecue skewers was bowed, and it did not want to stay down, so I ended up using my staple gun and adding one staple at the top so that I could hold that in place. Now, if yours are straight, you probably, shouldn't have any problem, but because mine was bowed, I did have to add a staple in there. Now, for the front part of the lantern, this is where we're going to add our round ornament, and I found the center of each of the dowels so that I could line my ornament up. It's going to sit a little bit on top of the dowel, but it's not enough to hold it or glue it just on its own. So I used some Dollar Tree clamps to hold that in place, flip it over, and I'm going to use 6 tiny little wood beads as well as some tweezers because you don't want to burn your fingers. I'm going to place some hot glue on the inside rounded portion of the ornament right up against the dowel and place 3 beads on each side, pushing it against the ornament and up to the dowel, and it's going to give it a better hold and hold our ornament right on the front of our lantern. This is how it should look. I'll have 3 of those beads, and I did make sure that I kind of kept the holes of the beads with the same way. So it really looks almost like a little hinge. And then I'll do the other side the exact same way by gluing those 3 beads down. And it's just going to give us a stronger hold for that ornament. Once those are in place and that glue has cooled down, I'm going to take that black chalkboard craft paint and go over each of these beads to blend them in, and just be real careful not to get it on your white dowel. So this is how it is looking, and it is gorgeous, just the way it is. Now I did leave the back open so that I can place a battery-operated LED candle in there. So that will stay open. I'm not going to put anything on the back. And again, it's super gorgeous, just the way it is, but I wanted to make a bow to go on the front of mine. I'm using some buffalo check ribbon. I buy this off of Amazon in the 50-yard roll, and I do have that linked in my Amazon store below. I'm just going to make a simple bow by creating 2 loops and then twisting 1 loop around and then tying it together. So you guys, I am not the best at making simple bows. This is the first time I was ever able to make just a simple bow with a piece of ribbon, and I was so excited. Now, it looks like a hot mess right now, but once you pull those loops out, you can kind of straighten it up. And I don't know why my brain just would not allow me to make just a simple bow, but I finally figured it out, and I'm so excited about it. So once I had that created, I'm going to hold it up to the top of my lantern to see how long I want my tails to be. And then I'm going to dovetail each end of the bow. And I'm going to put the tiniest bit of glue on the back part of the bow, just in case I change my mind and I want to take it off the lantern, I don't damage it. So I'm just going to put a little bit on there, hold it in place, and this lantern is finished. Thank you so much for watching today's mega Christmas video. I hope you found tons of inspiration. Thank you, each and every one of you, for taking time out of your day to watch my video, and I hope you have a wonderful and blessed Merry Christmas. See you guys next week.